very much. Thank you so much for the invitation to take part today. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to participate in such an interesting day, and also to share the work that we've been doing at ISWAN. So for anyone who hasn't come across ISWAN before, we're an international seafarer welfare organisation. We provide a range of services, resources, training and advocacy for seafarers and for their family members, as well as for the wider maritime sector. We're probably best known for Seafarer Help, which is 24/7 confidential, multilingual, multi-channel helpline that's available to seafarers and their families wherever they're in the world. We also operate Yacht Crew Help, which is a more recent helpline specifically for crew working in the yachting industry, and run a number of commission helplines through our Seafarer Assistance offer. So we are about to launch a new strategic plan. This is a sneak preview. We'll be launching next week. So it's for the next 3 years. And our vision for the next 3 years is a safe, fair and inclusive maritime sector that provides fulfilling careers and sustainable livelihoods for all seafarers and their families. And our mission, what ISWAN specifically seeks to do to contribute to that big picture, is to ensure that seafarers and their families have the support and resources they need to respond to the challenges of life at sea and to drive seafarer-centred change within the maritime sector. And that last phrase, seafarer-centred change, it's very much about today. I think what we're all talking about, very much behind the project that I'll be talking about today. It's going to be really at the heart of our work for the next 3 years. We're a small organisation. We have limited resources. And so we've been doing a lot of thinking about how we can have the greatest impact for seafarers and their families. And what we've come up with is using our daily contact with seafarers. So we talk to them every day through our helpline, through in-person casework in the Philippines, and be really listening for the issues that are impacting them, impacting their well-being, perhaps not yet being recognised, acknowledged, understood in the wider maritime sector. So that's what we're really trying to do, is listen carefully to seafarers and then use the platform that we have to try and get their concerns a bit more on the radar. So one way that we will be doing that is through continuing to make smarter use of insights from our helplines. We've been doing a lot of work on this over the last couple of years to be able to really translate what seafarers are telling us and identify any emerging themes and trends and welfare issues. So this is a preview from a live data dashboard that we've been developing and that hopefully will be making available to maritime stakeholders to have another source of insight into seafarer welfare trends. This is data for 2024. You can see we supported almost 5,200 seafarers and their family members on really wide range of issues, and so some general inquiries and then some much more serious issues that actually occupy a much larger proportion of the time of our helpline officers than these statistics indicate, but around mental health and well-being, abuse, bullying, harassment at sea. And actually it's through the helpline, through talking to seafarers, that we first became aware of the issue that I'll be talking about today. So the impact of decarbonisation on seafarers, on their well-being, on their sense of safety. And actually that process really helped us to develop this cycle that we really want to put at the heart of our strategic plan for the next 3 years, which is identifying emerging welfare issues, finding out more. So in this case, it was through a survey, but it could also be through focus groups, through research, co-creating solutions with seafarers. Really important, we want to be working much more proactively with seafarers to develop solutions that they feel would really work in the realities that they face at sea. And then using our platform to amplify their concerns and partnering with maritime stakeholders to achieve change. So I think it almost goes without saying that decarbonisation is one of the very big drivers of change in the maritime sector at the moment. I don't have in any way a technical background, and I found this graph interesting because you generally hear about fuels, but I think this graph really brought home to me that it's kind of all aspects of maritime that's affected: operating norms, logistics, fleet management, ship design, engineering, and then a whole host of different regulatory regimes in different parts of the world for different ports, different inspection requirements. And what we began to hear from seafarers is that actually this rapid pace of change, the scale of the change, is actually having a real impact on stress, workload, how they feel about their work. And there was a sense that actually this is not really being talked about very much. And then when we started to first work on this project a couple of years ago, began paying more attention to how decarbonisation is talked about at maritime conferences, in the maritime press. And I think this was just like the top hits of Google on one day when I looked into this more. And I think it's quite representative that there's a lot of concern about alternative fuels, about new partnerships to drive forward decarbonisation. But when seafarers are talked about, it's almost always, certainly 2 years ago, almost always about the training needs, which obviously is very important, really urgent. The infrastructure's not there. There's a lot of work around that. But you never really hear about what is this actually like to be the ones who are at sea, who are having to make all of this change so quickly. How is that impacting seafarers? So what we did is we worked with the Ship Owners Club, who've been really great supporters and partners in this project. And we carried out a survey to ask seafarers more about their experiences. We asked them about how the introduction of decarbonisation technologies and regulations is impacting their well-being, how it's impacting their sense of psychological safety at sea, how it's impacting how they feel about their work. We also asked how they see the coming years, what challenges they predict for the next 5 years. And we asked them what solutions they would like to see, what changes they think could make a difference in making this process easier for them. We had 400 responses from seafarers from 29 nationalities. The largest groups were from India and the Philippines. By role, the largest group was engineers, which is closely followed by deck officers. Majority of respondents were men, very representative of the seafaring community. 83% worked on tankers, and just over half, 55%, didn't have a fixed trading pattern, which did have some bearing on the research findings, whether seafarers did or didn't have fixed trading patterns. So one of the themes was that there was quite a strong sense that in principle many seafarers really understand the need for decarbonisation, they are in support of it, they're willing to be on board. So this on the left-hand side is a quote from the list, but it's from one seafarer, but it represented quite well the range of comments in support of decarbonisation. So this seafarer talked about the benefits of having modern ships and better shore interaction. They said that they were enjoying the challenge of learning new skills and getting to grips with new technologies. They were ready to step up and take on more responsibility and interested in having the additional challenge. They really welcomed clean fuels and improvements to the environment. And also, I think this was the most common one, like a real feeling of pride and satisfaction in making a contribution to a cleaner maritime sector. And as another seafarer said, I get more motivated knowing that the reason for all these carbon regulations is for the planet. So that was a kind of a nice finding that's something I think that can really be harnessed more, that there is this real, this enthusiasm, this willingness on behalf of seafarers to be partners in the journey towards a cleaner maritime sector. When we asked about impacts on technical sides of the work, it was quite a mixed picture. The yellow bars were seafarers who responded that the changes of decarbonisation had a positive impact on their work. So that's more than those seafarers who reported a negative impact, although there is still a significant minority, 20-25%, who felt that the impact had been negative across a range of more technical sides of their work. When we break this down by department or by role, perhaps unsurprisingly, the picture was quite different for engineers and deck officers. Obviously, engineers are responsible for being the ones who make new fuels work, responsible for making all of the changes as regards routine maintenance and equipment, handling all of the different fuels. They were much more likely than deck officers to report negative impacts, whereas deck officers were more likely to report negative impacts when it came to fulfilling audit inspection requirements, complying with port state controls. When we asked about impacts on well-being, the picture was very different. It was really an overwhelming response that more seafarers were experiencing the change of decarbonisation as having a negative impact on their well-being than those that said that it was having a positive impact. So over half, 54%, reported a negative impact on workload, 44% negative impact on stress, 40% negative impact on fatigue. And this finding was also a very strong theme through the comments and through the survey, that a third reported increased fear of criminalisation. So there was really a lot of concern. This is a very fast evolving landscape. It's very complex. Really a lot of anxiety and concern amongst seafarers about making inadvertent mistakes. That came through very strongly. The only area where there were more positive responses than negative was commitment to working at sea, which I think, kind of really loops back to the sense that actually many seafarers really support a cleaner maritime industry. So when we looked at it by role, by department, the negative impact, perhaps unsurprisingly, was being felt more by engineers, because of the huge challenges of needing to get to grips with using alternative fuels. The differential between engineering and deck officers was most pronounced when it came to stress. There was also a difference around fear of criminalisation and also mental health. And I think there's a couple of quotes I wanted to share from engineers, which I think speak really strongly to why this is having a negative impact on their well-being at work. So one engineer said, "The negative effects are both physical and mental. Understanding the scope of the change was a challenge because shore staff were also not clear how the change was going to take shape. Then cleaning and preparing the bunker tanks were a physical challenge. Use of different fuels required a lot of training and understanding. Maintaining machinery has added burden to an already stressed crew. The final blow is ongoing compliance checks from port and flag states plus third parties." And I think this is really powerful in conveying just the many different facets that are involved here. The baseline is already, as we've heard already today very powerfully, the baseline is already one of fatigue, stress, overstretch, and then on top of that is coming all of these changes, the mental load of having to adapt to very complex and high-risk new technologies, the physical load of having to deal with all of these physical routine tasks, and then the anxiety about complying with multiple overlapping regulatory regimes on top. So another engineer said, "Some ports have regulations, some don't. So we have to change over to different grades of fuel frequently, which is not good for the machinery, and of course it affects our rest hours." So the role of trading patterns, I think those quotes really help to demonstrate why trading patterns make a difference here. So those seafarers that do have fixed trading patterns were less likely to report a negative impact on their well-being. And I think it's easy to imagine why, that if there is as Emma was saying earlier, if you have more routine, more predictability in terms of port calls, you can settle more into a routine for the maintenance requirements, understand better what regulations you're going to need to follow. It's much more difficult if we don't have a fixed trading pattern in the same way. I think the quotes that I shared from engineers also really help to show how vulnerable seafarers are to experiencing techno-stress, which it's not a new concept. It was coined just over 40 years ago and defined as anxiety, tension, or distress caused when a person is overwhelmed by new technology. It occurs when we are unable to adapt and learn to use technology in a healthy and productive way. And often that inability to adapt is to do with conditions that if this technology is being introduced to conditions that are already stressful, then it's very difficult to have the resilience to adapt to all of the additional change. And I think it's also quite easy to see how, so these are 5 factors in techno-stress that I think are all very relevant to life at sea. So overload, this changes very, very fast. There's a lot to get used to very, very quickly. Techno-invasion, you can't escape technology. That's more true on a ship than almost any other environment. It's your home and it's your work. And decarbonisation is, as we all know, coming alongside lots of other technological factors, the introduction of more monitoring and CCTV, the introduction of wearable technologies. I think it's quite easy to see how for some seafarers technology might feel inescapable and somewhat invasive. Complexity, yes, as one of the engineers said, it's a huge mental load. Insecurity, so this is a sense of anxiety that perhaps your role may be replaced by technology, or perhaps there will be others coming along who have more skills than you in these technologies, and so perhaps it's undermining job security. And also uncertainty, just the anxiety around not knowing what's coming, what more changes on the horizon, how is this all going to play out. And actually Raphael and Maria's colleague at WMU did a very nice case study about techno-stress at sea, which is really worth looking at, and really speaks to this phenomenon very powerfully. So I think what came through very strongly from the study is the extent to which decarbonisation, the rapid pace of change, the high risk nature of alternative fuels is really impacting the sense of psychological safety of many seafarers. And as we know, psychological safety is a really important factor in being physically safe. So one seafarer said, the ships are brand new, but nobody knows what they're dealing with. Even the manufacturers have themselves designed it for the first time. So it's like a pilot project with testing being done on live sailing ships, which I found really powerful quote, this sense of really lack of confidence in some of the technology that this seafarer is being asked to implement. And I think it really speaks to the importance of clear communication with seafarers. So of course it's important that these technologies are tested. And additionally, it's also important that seafarers believe them to be safe, that has been well communicated, that they feel adequately confident in the technology and their ability to use the technology, that their team is safe to use the technology. And another seafarer said, one is always scared of getting in trouble with the authorities or company due to an oversight or mistake. This is mainly due to varying rules in different parts of the world. Also, interpretations are different in different countries, and the seafarer is always wrong. And this really spoke to that fear of criminalisation, of being blamed and held accountable for inadvertent errors in an extremely complex landscape. And again, I found it very powerful in really bringing home what this must be like to be trying to adapt so quickly to all of these changes. And also, additionally, within a culture in which there is a lot of fear of being blamed, of being treated in a very punitive fashion if something goes wrong, if there's a mistake in reporting. Or so seafarers also spoke about some of the consequences to them of this degree of stress. So one seafarer said extra paperwork and adherence to varying rules leads to fatigue and increases the probability of accidents and poor health due to fatigue. As we've just heard, fatigue is already a huge issue at sea, and it was definitely the perception of some of these seafarers that the rapid pace of technological change is adding to that already very substantial problem. Another seafarer said, so many new things to implement, but wages and care from the company are still the same. Why would the crew sacrifice their mental peace for someone else's experiments? And I think this also was a really powerful theme that for many seafarers who took part in the survey, they felt that an awful lot was being asked of them in terms of adaptation, in terms of training, and that there wasn't at the moment enough acknowledgement of how much they're being asked to adapt to, the impact that it's having on them, and that actually that would make a huge difference if that was better understood, more valued, more taken into account. So key challenges for the next 5 years. We asked, obviously we know that the pace of decarbonisation is going to continue to accelerate. We asked seafarers what they see as the key challenges for them for the next 5 years. Perhaps unsurprisingly, increased workload and fatigue was the number one challenge. So a lot of concerns that there just isn't enough resource resilience to take on more and more additional work. Also, seafarers, another theme was really this tension between commercial pressures and decarbonisation requirements. So I think this was felt quite strongly by many seafarers that they were needing to meet these twin pressures from the company to, for example, use fuel in the most economical ways because of how financially pressurised the industry is, and also having to require to meet decarbonisation requirements as well. That between these two very forceful pressures, that their well-being was often overlooked. I think that came through very clearly. And their solutions. So actually here there was, by some margin, the solution that most seafarers put forward was improved technology, systems and processes, which was selected by over half of seafarers. And I think this really spoke to the sense that seafarers had of, there's a lot of pressure to introduce this change very quickly. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like there's too much thinking in how it's actually working for them. How all of these systems, there's a lot of systems that are not necessarily very integrated, very intuitive, very joined up. And that actually really increases the stress and anxiety, that it's not a very human-centered system at the moment. And that for them was the number one thing, that for the system to be set up in a way that would make it easier to use, reduce anxiety, reduce uncertainty, reduce stress, to put really to be thinking about how all of the different regulations, how all of the different systems, processes link together and make the whole operate in a smoother way. And then the second factor was more focus on a no-blame culture. I think this came through very loud and strong, the level of anxiety around mistakes, around getting things wrong, around, particularly with the multiple regulations. There was it was very clear that seafarers were really, that was putting seafarers under a lot of pressure. That would make a huge difference to move towards a more just culture, a learning culture, a safety culture, that mistakes are treated somewhat differently rather than very punitively, which is how a lot of the respondents to the survey felt. So key recommendations, this is just a summary. There are more recommendations in the report, but certainly one, I think the main thing is really thinking about what well-being means amongst all of this technological change, putting it on the agenda. And we're thinking of, when maritime stakeholders are thinking about rolling out very whole-scale changes, making sure that well-being is factored in, particularly that the impact on workloads is being addressed, that there's acknowledgement of the inherent stresses of technological change, that there's kind of holistic thinking about what safety means from a psychological perspective as well as from a physical perspective. As I just mentioned, human-centered approach to systems and designs was a very, very strong theme that came through, in a very powerful way that companies could protect against techno stresses through having much more joined up system design that is kind of more friendly for the person using it, and just and coherent regulatory regimes, trying to remove some of the stress from seafarers about regulatory compliance. And I wanted to finish with a quote. I'm a big supporter of decarbonisation and taking steps to reduce our negative impact on the planet and our surroundings. I just wish it was done in a much better way. And I think this quote really speaks to the two sides that came through our survey, that there really is all of this kind of willingness, interest on behalf of seafarers to be part of decarbonisation and understanding of the urgent need and why it is so important, but also a sense that at the moment that it is not being implemented in a way that works for them, really, that it's causing a huge amount of stress that is not being necessarily taken into account enough, and that actually there's a real opportunity as we're, as pace of decarbonisation accelerates, there's an opportunity for maritime stakeholders to think about how seafarers can be treated much more as partners in this journey, that it could become something that helps to attract seafarers to stay in the industry rather than becoming another thing that risks pushing seafarers out because the level of stress is just too much. So the full research is available on our website, and we're also continuing to work with the Shipowners Club on some practical guidance for both seafarers and for maritime stakeholders about managing the impact of techno-stress, trying to protect against techno-stress through the decarbonisation journey, which will be available in due course. Thank you very much. Thank you.